Crisis, you often cannot see the wood for the trees. And at the time, I certainly could not imagine positives emanating from lockdown. Thank you very much, Leila, and in fact, all 6 speakers this morning for turning a crisis into positives for the future. We now have a very short period to take questions from the audience, including our virtual audience. Please indicate to whom your question is addressed. And in the interest of saving some time, we have arranged that questions directed to Leila will be handled by the panel discussion that will happen after the question and answer session. Questions from anyone in the audience? Right, Charlene.
My question is directed. Good day. My question is directed to Robert. So Robert, research is for the public good, and the pandemic has taught us many lessons. One of the lessons is we need to act now. What I'm asking is, isn't it time that we rethink the embargo situation, the embargo periods? Why do we dogmatically follow the embargo periods? And the researchers are very quick to say, well, that's the principle. We have time guidelines on embargoes, but I'm asking you that we should be putting some pressure, or we should be rethinking embargoes.
Robert?
I completely agree. So if you happen to be funded by a funder as part of the Coalition S group, then the policy is that there is zero embargo. No, you have to make your work open without any embargo. No matter what the publisher says, the funder is saying that research has made open access at the time of publication. So I think we need other research funders to adopt that position, and then we need to work with the research community to make sure that they either submit their publications to venues which support that view, or encourage them to adopt approaches to at least make sure their author-accepted manuscript is made open access. There is no excuse for research published in the 21st century to be behind a publisher paywall.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? I see from the virtual audience there are 2 questions directed to Elizabeth and Sibu, and I'm going to read them both so that you can address both of them. Sibu is around. As much as we do a lot to promote literacies, literacy itself is an acquired habit, not necessarily a skill that is taught. People can also choose to embrace, resist, or reject literacies. So, how do you prove that you've made a difference? What indicators confirm that you did well? And then another question, in your experience, have you made any customization to training and reference services for differently abled students? What kind of inclusive efforts have you made to ensure that no student is left behind, including these vulnerable users? Sibu, did you get both of them?
Yes.
Would you like to move and read them here?
I'll try and respond. Thank you for those questions. When it comes to, I agree with the question that it is a habit, but when you're judging literacy from when people are growing up, the type of education that we receive from the different schools, at higher education, find that there is a gap from primary level education to higher education. So what I try and do as an identifier of the impact after the imparted knowledge to the user is improvement of grades, improvement of research strategies, and students, when I was in the law section, they've come to me asking assistance with preparing for moot court and other presentations and assignments. And even there was a student, I just forgot his name, who published a book, who came to ask for assistance in that regard. So when they initially came into the library, they were just looking for, okay, I'm just going to read this and then it's going to help. But when I actually walked them through the research process and how the information, the impact of the information that they choose will actually have an impact on whatever outcome they are looking for. And in law, you need to take a stance. So the information itself will help you whether it's a positive stance or it's a negative stance, as long as you've got the right credible information. So as I said in the presentation, as much as we didn't have a survey across the information services, a satisfactory survey, we did receive a good compliments from staff and the clients that we've assisted. And the second one was inclusive.
Disabled students.
Yes, I'm not sure about my other colleagues, but there is a disability unit on campus. So my understanding is that once a student has actually alerted the university that they have a disability, then there would be conversation on how to better assist the student and in a collaborative effort with the disability unit and our resources as well. Unfortunately, in my time there, I did not encounter that any client or any student with a learning disability. But at the Learning Commons, they did create a space for visually impaired students. I think there's a PC and some material as well. So there are provisions to assist differently abled clients.
Thank you, Sibu. The next question coming in online, I think this is intended for Kate, is students spend a lot of time online focusing somewhere else. How do you attract the concentration and the attention of the disappearing library users towards invisible information resources? That's not quite clear to me, especially with the disruption of social media notifications, trolls, and hypes.
Thank you for the question. I think that would probably be better answered by a faculty librarian. The things that we did, I think, were we tried to make sure that we were visible. And by sewing our services up as best we could, and as Leila was saying, increasing our LibGuides and other such things, we were hoping that we were putting things in front of the students at the time at which they needed it. And therefore, I think it was really just about visibility. Whether they had the attention span to read through them, I don't know. I hope so. But all of us, I think, use different techniques to try and break things down into more bite-sized chunks to make them more relevant and make them timely, just in time and just for a particular purpose. I think the teaching sessions are a completely different matter and not ones that I've actually delivered myself. But I was hearing, for example, that our doctoral skills sessions were way better attended virtually than they ever were in person. And that's possibly about the time that researchers have to be able to give to these things. So I think there are quite a lot of positives that we're seeing coming from that. And those are the things that we are definitely going to continue with. The other thing I think was also about delivering more online in that way. We're in people's homes and we're there at the time at which they want to access us, rather than it being a timetabled session somewhere in a room that you have to find somewhere on campus and make the time to attend. So I think there were a lot of positives there and a lot of different techniques that we experimented with.
Lovely, thank you, Kate. I think Leila has a follow-up question on that.
No, just another comment here. Although we moved training online, we still did our learning objectives survey after every training session. So you then could pick up whether students were paying attention or not. And we didn't lose students. They all responded positively. So we knew that they were listening.
Thank you. Question to Jeremy. What does the new normal look like for the required staffing structures and staff competencies of the post-COVID library? How do we prepare ourselves for this future, and who are our allies on campus?
Thank you for the question. I think, as I said in my presentation, there is no simple answer to any of this. It's very dependent on different universities, and some will be campus-based institutions and some won't be campus-based institutions. But I think one of the key things that I mentioned during the second part of my talk was changes in institutional culture. And I think whatever happens, there are significant changes in institutional culture and significant changes to technological development. So to change both the culture and the skills and the competencies are going to become paramount, and really going to have to concentrate on these things. But the key thing is to understand your own institution. As I said, institutions are going to be very different. So the comment about allies, I think, is key, really. And so you've got to understand the future, how the future strategies of the institution have changed, how the future teaching and research of the institution is changing, so that your need for your staff's competences and skills to change is allied to both of those things.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any other online questions, Marie? I think we're at the end of our online. Any questions from the audience? One final question. There's one hand there. I can't see who it
It's
is.
me. Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Oh, Siviwe.
Yes, I actually wanted the last question to pose it more to the heads of libraries. I know that Jeremy, made the comment, but I would have, loved to hear, Kate's comment in terms of what will happen in a post-COVID world in terms of flexible working hours, etc., etc. But my other question is to Robert. So while I agree that it's important for data to be open and to be shared, but we also notice that during this COVID-19 that there are also negative consequences from sharing your data, wherein you have some countries that are not sharing anything basically, and some countries are sharing, and you end up being on the red list of certain countries, whereas those that are not sharing are not getting any consequences for it. So what is your comment on that?
Yeah, thank you. I agree that, as I try to say in my talk, I don't expect all data to be completely shared without any restrictions. I think if there are, for example, in the field of clinical data, which may have some sort of personal identifiable information, which if you triangulate enough might be able to identify an individual, I think it is right and proper that is made available under terms and conditions. But I still think, these data, if someone's research is dependent upon that data, the community needs to be able to scrutinize that data to validate the information. And there's been many examples of, there was the fuss last year over and I've forgotten the name of the company, but articles published in New England and Lancet, which is all predicated on some data which didn't exist. So there's not a one size fits all. I think for the purpose of sort of reproducibility and to validate research findings, that data must be accessible. I accept that it can at times be difficult, and therefore we need safeguards to ensure that that data is shared in a responsible way. And I think as funders, we have a sort of a responsibility to ensure that we recognize that sharing data is something we want our researchers to do, and we take that into account in assessing their grant applications. So don't just look for the word sound nature and science, but we look to see how they're how they're acting as a good global science citizen and sharing that data in a fair and responsible way. But it is a very complex matter, which I think we probably need more time than I've got this morning to discuss. But it's a very difficult issue, but one I think we will increasingly need to address.
Thank you very much. I know there may be more questions from the audience, but unfortunately our time is up for this session. With that, I would like to thank all 6 speakers and all the attendees, also those joining us virtually, for their participation this morning. Please remain for the panel discussion chaired by Kate Robinson. And for those of you who still have questions to some of the speakers, please feel free to address that to them during lunchtime?